that taxation burden on families has increased. And as a result, as you all know, the financial strain on relationships is one of the big reasons that relationships don't last. And so when the federal government makes it harder to stay married, as we do, not just with the marriage penalty, but just with the absolute high rates of taxation that we have on families, because we didn't keep up with this dependent deduction for children. To me, it was an insidious way to discourage people having children, and more importantly, to put an unusual strain on marriages. Look at the Obama administration. When it comes to the taxes and requirements for people to pay for Obamacare, if you are living together, you pay, I think it's $4, I've said one place it was $4, I guess it depends on your income level, but it's $4,000 to $10,000 more if you're living, if you're married as opposed to if you're living together. So, I mean, there's all sorts of things in the government that discourages people to be married. And I think one of the things we need to do is encourage and help support families so they're not heavily burdened by the tax code. And that's why I'm not for just a flat tax, because I think there's certain things the government can do that are important for society in the tax code, but they should be limited. And they're limited to children, second, charities. Those media institutions of our society. We want those organizations to be able to get money and for you to encourage to give money, because that's how we build a good and healthy society in our country. And then pensions, health care, and housing. Again, basic staples to provide stability to the family. Other than that, no more deductions, a very simple code.
I very much want you to be our next President of the United States. One of your opponents has made a suggestion of cutting federal outlays next year by $1 trillion. How much will you cut the outlays next year?
What I said is I would spend less money next year than this year. We would cut $5 trillion over 5 years. One of the things that I've said, I can't give you a specific number, and $1 trillion is, I can throw out a number, but I think what we need to do is understand that we've got to reduce, we've got to push for a balanced budget, put a budget in place. We'll propose a budget that gets the balance in 5 years, and I say that because going out and say, well, we're gonna cut $1 trillion in the first year. I probably won't cut $1 trillion in the first year. But what I will do is do something. First off, the ability to cut $1 trillion you can't do unless you get the Congress to join you. All right. So you want to say, I'm going to cut $1 trillion, but as you see, it's hard for Congress to cut $2 billion, much less $1 trillion. So what you have to do is you have to put a workable plan on the table to, over a responsible period of time, begin to shrink the size of government. But this idea of something, well, just take a meat axe to it. Well, you can say that, but we have to put a plan together that's responsible. We have things that we can do. For example, I talk about taking entitlement programs and doing what we did with welfare reform. Welfare reform, I was the author of it in the House, was the floor manager in the Senate, got it passed. Did it save money in the first year? No. But over time it did. Why? Well, it did in the first year a little bit. But over time it did because we cut it, not much, but we cut it, but we capped it. It didn't grow. And we gave the states the flexibility to use that money in a way that they wanted to, consistent with two things, a time limit and a work requirement. And what happened? They cut the welfare rolls by 50%. It freed up money in state budgets, so they didn't have to increase taxes. So if you look at things, if we can do that with all these entitlement programs, food stamps, cut them, and so there'll be a cut the first year. But the big advantage is you're freezing it for 5 years. And so the cumulative value of not seeing that money go up, as it does every year, you're seeing that money hold firm, and you're seeing savings at the state level and other federal programs. That's where you get the cumulative effect of over time, and it's not a heart attack to the economy. It is a smart and responsible way to get this budget down, and then over time spend less money every year than the year before. That's the way you get your budget back in balance. You do it in a responsible way and are able to grow the economy commensurate with that. It's a nice little way of putting it together. I remind you of Ronald Reagan. Reagan went in there and did some big things, but it took 2 or 3 years for his program to finally get in. And that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a while, but you will see over time. We will get to that balanced budget, we will reduce the size of government, and we will grow this economy. There you go.
I was wondering, what would you do as president as far as securing our borders and dealing with the illegal immigration problem in this country?
Question, what would I do on, for those who don't know here, on securing the border and illegal immigration? And I've been probably clearer than everybody else on this. The border is not secure. According to most of the reports, it's about 40% secure. I'm not too sure what that means. If you build a fence around your house at 40% complete, I don't know how that helps you. You're either secure or not, right? So you need to have secure borders, which means the whole border needs to be secure, and not just. You know, I know people are concerned about illegal immigrants and what they can do here in the community, but as we're seeing, this is what's going on with the drug wars at the borders, the violence that's occurring there. Look at what's going on with. I was down in Texas the other day and talking to a border agent who was communicating to me about how they're picking up people who speak Spanish as a second language. They have an Arabic tint to their voice. We're talking about jihadists. We know of their jihadist training camps. We know of their alliance between Iran and Venezuela and Cuba and Nicaragua and Bolivia and Ecuador. I mean, this is a serious problem, and it's at our southern border. And particularly if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, it's not just going to be at our southern border. We better have that border secure. Because if Barack Obama continues to be president, we are going to be suffering huge consequences of a nuclear Iran. And I have no doubt if he is reelected president, Iran will get a nuclear weapon. Because this president doesn't have it in him to stop it. And we've seen that repeatedly. So I just share with you that border security is a national security issue, not just an economic security issue. Out. The second issue is enforce the law in this country. We have laws in this country with respect to immigration. I know the other candidates in the race have a little different view of it than I do, but I come from it. My father was an immigrant. My grandfather was an immigrant. People say, well, if you've been here a long time, you should be able to stay. My grandfather left my dad for 5 years because that's what he had to do to come here to earn his citizenship and bring the rest of the family. We made the sacrifice. I suspect that there are lots of examples in this room, as there is all across America, of people who made sacrifices. To come to this country. And they didn't come for any kind of government benefit. In 1925, there wasn't any government benefits when my grandfather came, except one, freedom. Yeah. Microphone guy go. Oh, there you go. Okay. Let's get a young guy. Here you go. He has a sweater vest on, so he gets an end. Anybody with a sweater vest gets picked this year.
I was wondering, in regards to the Military Defense Authorization Act, on whether you support it, and if so, how do you justify it constitutionally?
I believe that people who are detained in this country, who are citizens of this country, who are detained by the military in suspicion of terrorism, have a right to a habeas corpus petition and be provided an attorney, and have a judge be able to should be required to determine whether, based on the preponderance of the evidence, that the government should continue to hold them. And I would make sure that there is a law passed, and I know they're working on one right now. But if that does not occur, there will be a law passed to make sure that that is the standard, that American citizens cannot be detained indefinitely by their government without having a trial. gentleman, it's not a sweater vest, but it's close.
Obviously, the Obamacare is probably the worst piece of legislation that ever can be signed into law in this country.
What is your position?
To repeal it, and how you can be sure it's going to be effective.
Question, you probably couldn't hear it, the microphone wasn't working. The question's on Obamacare. I agree with this gentleman that, look, I wouldn't be in this race. Karen and I would never have gotten into this. I mean, we have 7 children, ages 20 to 3 and a half. And for all of those who have inquired and have been praying for our little girl Bella, let me thank you. She is doing just great. By the way. Back again as the happy, healthy center of our family, and we feel very blessed. But I can tell you, given the situations in our family right now, this was not the best time for us to be running for president. But it was a time when I felt our country needed someone to go out there and be able to paint that picture that I talked about before, and there's no better example of a government run amok than with Obamacare.
Thank you.
Obamacare is the linchpin, in my opinion. It's the game changer for America. If Obamacare is implemented, we will go from a little less than half the people in this country being dependent upon the government for some benefit of some sort, to every single American now having to go and pay tribute to Washington, D.C. for their little piece of health care. Once that happens, society changes. We create that dependency. All of these mediated institutions, your local business, all the things that where you can get your health care, all that becomes irrelevant. It all becomes focused on Washington. And they're the ones who are going to tell you that they've created a right. They've created a right for you, and they're going to give you all this health. You'll get a card, and you'll get all this health care. But then we found out with rights, when government creates rights, they can threaten to take it away from you if you don't do what they tell you to do. Right. And so when it comes down to, I was always saying, that I was worried about Obamacare because it would rob you of your economic right to go out and get the health care that you want. It would make you dependent upon government. All of those things are game changers for America. But now we see that they will use any time that government can get some power and authority over you. They will use it not just to tell you what economically you have to do, but now they will tell you what you have to do and what you can believe and how you can exercise your beliefs.
Who was your insurance
What-
provider when you were
what-
senator?
Who's asking that question?
I did.
Oh, good.
Who was your insurance provider when you were senator?
I was a part of the federal employees health benefit system like everybody else.
So the government provided your insurance.
Let me get to that for a second. So what's happening now?
Yes.
Oh, by the way, so you like the federal employees health benefit system?
I'd like to have your insurance.
Okay, great. This man would like to have our insurance. I'm not in the government anymore.
Well, if it's good
But-
enough, if it's good enough.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you. So, how many people would like to have the same health insurance that members of Congress have? Raise your hand. So I assume you're for the Paul Ryan Medicare plan, because that's exactly what it is. It is exactly what members of Congress have. It's called a premium support model for Medicare. It's exactly what the federal employee benefit system is. The federal employees health benefit system provides a fixed amount of money for every single federal employee. They provide a booklet about yay high in Washington. My guess it would be smaller, maybe in Muskegon, but you'd have several choices to choose from as the private sector health care plan. It has to compete against other. Let me finish. That has to compete against other private sector health care plans for your business as a federal employee, which is what the Paul Ryan Medicare plan does. It says that we will provide a benefit for every senior. Lower income seniors will get a higher benefit. Higher income seniors will get a lower benefit, means tested in that regard. And if you would go out and choose as a senior the plan that best fits your needs, like every member of Congress does every single year. And in so doing, you can pick a more expensive plan with more benefits, more providers, more hospitals, prescription drugs, maybe that have name brands as opposed to generic. And if you want to pay more, and the money the government gives you isn't enough, then you pay more for it. You may want lower co-pays. All of those things are then your choice. The government, instead of saying, you get a one-size-fits-all government program, which, by the way, is Medicare today, we're going to give you choices, just like members of Congress have. Now, according to President Obama and his supporters, I'm not suggesting he's a supporter, but according to President Obama and his supporter, that is the equivalent of throwing grandma off a cliff. That's what he's referred to this. Why? Because he doesn't trust you with freedom. He doesn't trust you that you can make up your own mind and do your thing. One other question. Anybody with any other vests? No other vests? Oh, I'm sorry. She's got a sweater vest. Okay, we'll give her one. Now you know the key to getting asked a question.
Under a Santorum administration, would you describe our relationship with Israel?
Be happy to. The question is, for those who may not have heard, called relationship with Israel or our administration. Unlike other people in the race, and obviously some of them have not been involved in federal politics, we've got a very long and strong history in my relationship with the State of Israel and the work that I've done. Two major pieces of legislation, one having to do with Iran and the other having to do with Syria. I worked with the pro-Israel community and, frankly, the expatriate community from Lebanon and Iran in developing both these pieces of legislation to try to help first get Syria out of Lebanon and therefore out of threatening northern Israel. And of course, 8 years ago, I was out talking about Iran's nuclear program and talking about how Iran was developing a nuclear weapon and that we had an obligation to confront them and put sanctions in place so they would deter them from doing so. I can tell you President Bush opposed me when I proposed those, as did Senator Obama. The person who led the fight against my amendment when I put it up on the floor of the United States Senate was none other than Joe Biden. If you want to know what position to take on a foreign policy matter, you only have one place to go. Look to what Joe Biden believes and do the opposite. So we worked to make sure that we had not only a strong relationship with Israel, but that we worked to make sure that the threats that were posed to both Israel and to our country were addressed as aggressively as they could. I went out in 2006, and yes, I lost my race for re-election. I remind you, I've run 5 times, all 5 times as a conservative. I can't say that about everybody in this race, but I've run all 5 times as a conservative. I won a 60% Democratic district, a 71% Democratic district. First time against an incumbent Democrat. Second time I was pitted against an incumbent Democrat, but he decided not to run against me. And then the third time I ran in the state of Pennsylvania, over 500,000 more Democrats and Republicans. And I defeated another Democratic incumbent whose campaign was run by none other than James Carville 2 years after he got elected. And then I ran for re-election in the year that George Bush lost the state by 6, and I won it by, lost me by 5, and I won it by 6. And so I won 4 races as a conservative in tough states and tough districts. And in a horrible election year, in 2006, as you remember, was a horrible election year. We lost. But at the time that I was out there, I was talking about big issues. I was talking about the threat of a nuclear Iran. I was pushing it against in the United States Senate when even my president was against it. I was talking about how we had to win in Iraq at a time when some were suggesting that we needed, even on the Republican side, to lost because it was lost. I don't change like a well-oiled weather vane. I stand up and I fight for what I believe is right. agree with me, but you know where I'm going to stand. Yes, sir. I'm going to be accountable to you. So that's what I'm asking the folks here at Mission. Let's put someone up there who isn't going to go out and promise hope and change and let you fill in the blank slate and then be surprised after Election Day what you're going to get. Let's go out there and do something different than we did in 2008. In 2008, we were at a tough financial time. The markets had crashed, bailouts were underway. Things seemed to be unraveling. And Barack Obama and his light show went out and convinced the American public they needed someone they could believe. They found out what that got. Someone who took that as a message to do whatever he thought was best for you and rule you and shove things like Obamacare down your throat, even though you didn't want it.
Next November,
Well-
you tell them, get off my plane.
Next November. Well, in this election, we're going to be doing something different. In this election, we're not going to be looking for someone that we can believe in. We're going to go back to what Americans have always done. We had confidence. And that is to elect someone who believes in you.